The loyal service dog won't stop barking at the veteran's casket, and when a former military medic questions why, the funeral director becomes visibly anxious. Then this medic uncovers a disturbing truth that will shock the entire town. Rain fell steadily over Pinewood Cemetery, the droplets sliding down black umbrellas like tears as mourners gathered for the funeral of Sergeant James Falcon Reeves. The sky had darkened to a deep grey, matching the somber mood of those who came to pay their final respects to the decorated Army Ranger. Family members, fellow veterans and townspeople stood in silence, their heads bowed as the funeral director, Mr. Malcolm Hargrove, delivered his practiced words of comfort. Among the crowd, a German shepherd named Atlas sat perfectly still beside his handler's wheelchair. Colonel Marcus Turner, a silver-haired veteran in his 60s who had served with Falcon in their younger days, had brought Atlas along. The dog wasn't just any service animal. Atlas had been specially trained for veterans with PTSD and had been Falcon's loyal companion for the last 3 years of his life. As Mr. Hargrove concluded his speech and invited Falcon's sister Emily to share her memories, Atlas suddenly became alert. His ears perked up and he fixed his gaze on the polished oak casket at the front. A low whine escaped his throat. Colonel Turner gently patted Atlas's head. "Easy, boy," he whispered. But Atlas wouldn't settle. His whine grew louder, drawing glances from nearby mourners who shifted uncomfortably. Emily faltered mid-sentence, her eulogy momentarily forgotten as she watched the dog's unusual behavior. Atlas pulled against his leash, straining toward the casket. His whine turned into a single, sharp bark that echoed across the cemetery. "I'm sorry," Colonel Turner apologized, trying to quiet the dog. "He's never done this before." Mr. Hargrove stepped forward, his professional smile firmly in place. "Perhaps the animal should wait in one of our facility vehicles. We can provide water." But Atlas wouldn't be silenced. He barked again, more urgently this time, his eyes never leaving the casket. The mourners began to murmur among themselves, some glancing nervously at the casket as if expecting it to open. "That's Falcon's dog," someone whispered. "They were inseparable. Animals sense things we can't," an elderly woman added, clutching her necklace. "My grandmother always said dogs could see spirits." Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat loudly. "Please, let's continue with our service. Mrs. Reeves, you were sharing your brother's memory with us." But Atlas wouldn't be deterred. He barked again, each sound more insistent than the last. Colonel Turner frowned, studying the dog closely. In all the years he'd known military working dogs and service animals, he'd never seen behavior quite like this without cause. From the back of the gathering, a man stepped forward. He was tall and lean, with close-cropped dark hair and the unmistakable bearing of a soldier, though he wore a simple charcoal suit rather than a uniform. Dr. Nathan Westbrook had served as a combat medic in the same unit as Falcon years ago, before pursuing a medical degree. He hadn't spoken to Falcon in years, but when he heard of his former comrade's passing, he felt compelled to attend. "I know this dog," Nathan said, his voice carrying across the now silent gathering. "Atlas was trained to alert to specific medical conditions. He's not barking at random." Mr. Hargrove's smile tightened. "I'm sure the animal is simply distressed by the atmosphere. Dogs don't understand funeral proceedings." Nathan's eyes narrowed. "Service dogs like Atlas understand more than most people give them credit for. Something's wrong." As if confirming Nathan's words, Atlas barked again, now pulling so hard toward the casket that Colonel Turner's wheelchair shifted slightly. "This is highly inappropriate," Mr. Hargrove said, his voice rising slightly. Sweat had begun to bead on his forehead despite the cool rain. "We need to proceed with the service. Mrs. Reeves, please continue." But Emily was now watching Atlas with growing concern. "What is he trying to tell us?" she asked, her voice trembling. Nathan approached Atlas and Colonel Turner, crouching down to the dog's level. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "What is it? What do you see?" Atlas whined and pulled toward the casket again. Nathan glanced up at the funeral director, who was now dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief despite the chilly air. "When exactly did Sergeant Reeves pass away, Mr. Hargrove?" Nathan asked, standing to his full height. 3 days ago, Mr. Hargrove replied quickly. "In his sleep, very peaceful. The coroner confirmed natural causes, heart failure." "It's all in the death certificate." "Heart failure?" Nathan repeated skeptically. "Falcon was only 42 and in excellent physical condition. He ran marathons for charity." Mr. Hargrove's smile faltered. "Sometimes these conditions are undiagnosed until it's too late." Very tragic. Colonel Turner was now watching Mr. Hargrove with increasing suspicion. "Falcon had his annual VA physical just 2 months ago. Clean bill of health." The funeral director's eyes darted between the casket, Atlas, and the gathering crowd. "These things can develop suddenly. Now, if we could please continue." Atlas barked again, more frantically now, and several of the mourners began to murmur among themselves. The atmosphere shifted from somber to tense as people picked up on the growing unease. "I think we should open the casket," Nathan said suddenly, his voice firm. A collective gasp rose from the gathering. Mr. Hargrove's face drained of color. "That is absolutely out of the question," he sputtered. "The family has already said their goodbyes in private. This is completely inappropriate and against our protocols." Emily stepped forward, her grief momentarily overshadowed by confusion. "Actually, we didn't have a private viewing. Mr. Hargrove advised against it because of the manner of death. He said it would be too distressing." Nathan's gaze sharpened on the funeral director. "Manner of death? I thought you said it was peaceful. Heart failure in his sleep?" Mr. Hargrove's handkerchief was now twisted between his fingers. "It was, but the medication sometimes causes changes in appearance that can be upsetting to loved ones." "What medication?" Colonel Turner demanded. "Falcon didn't take any regular medication. He was proud of that fact." The rain began to fall harder, drumming against the canopy above the casket. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a low rumble of thunder that seemed to emphasize the tension building among the mourners. "This is ridiculous," Mr. Hargrove snapped, his professional demeanor cracking. "I've been a funeral director for 27 years. I know my business. That dog is simply distressed, and you're allowing it to disrupt a solemn occasion." But Nathan had noticed something else. A faint tremor in Mr. Hargrove's hands, the way his eyes kept darting to his watch, the beads of sweat despite the cool air. As a combat medic, he'd learned to read the signs of fear, and everything about the funeral director's body language screamed anxiety. "If everything is as you say," Nathan said calmly, "then opening the casket should settle the matter. Atlas, we'll see there's nothing wrong and we can proceed." Mr. Hargrove stepped between Nathan and the casket. "Absolutely not. I cannot allow it. It's against protocol and would traumatize the family." Emily moved to stand beside Nathan. "I want to know what's happening," she said, her voice finding new strength. If my brother's dog is trying to tell us something, I want to listen." Other mourners began to voice their agreement, their faces showing confusion and growing concern. Mr. Hargrove looked around desperately, as if seeking an escape route. "This is preposterous. I'll have to ask you all to leave if this continues. We can reschedule the service for another day when cooler heads prevail. Or," Nathan said, taking a step closer to the funeral director, "you could tell us what's really going on. Why are you so opposed to opening that casket? What don't you want us to see?" Mr. Hargrove's face flushed red. "I am protecting the dignity of the deceased and the sensibilities of the bereaved. That is my job." Atlas barked again, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. His behavior was becoming more agitated by the minute, as if he sensed time was running out. Nathan looked at Colonel Turner, who nodded slightly. A silent understanding passed between the two veterans. Something wasn't right, and they both knew. "I think," Nathan said, addressing the gathered mourners, "that Atlas is trying to tell us something important about Falcon. As his friends and family, don't we owe it to him to listen?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mr. Hargrove looked increasingly cornered, his eyes darting between the faces surrounding him. "This is completely unprofessional," he protested weakly. "I cannot condone this breach of protocol." Emily stepped forward, tears mingling with raindrops on her face. "Mr. Hargrove, this is my brother we're talking about. If there's something wrong, I need to know. Please." The funeral director's resistance began to crumble under the weight of the collective demand. His shoulders slumped slightly, and he took a small step back from the casket. "Fine," he muttered, "but I wash my hands of the consequences. This is against my professional recommendation." As Mr. Hargrove reluctantly moved toward the casket to unlock it, Nathan exchanged a meaningful look with Colonel Turner. Whatever they were about to discover, they both sensed it would change everything they thought they knew about Falcon's death. Atlas had stopped barking and now stood rigid, his eyes fixed on the casket as Mr. Hargrove's shaking hands reached for the lock. The cemetery fell completely silent, save for the steady drumming of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Every person present held their breath, waiting to see what had caused such unusual behavior in a dog trained to remain calm in even the most chaotic situations. What was Atlas trying to tell them? And why was the funeral director so desperate to keep the casket closed? The moment stretched into eternity as Mr. Hargrove's trembling fingers fumbled with the casket lock. The metallic click echoed across the cemetery when it finally released, causing several mourners to flinch. He hesitated, his knuckles white against the polished wood, before Emily stepped forward. "Please," she said firmly, "open it." With visible reluctance, Mr. Hargrove lifted the lid. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by stunned silence. Nathan pushed forward to see for himself, and what he found made his blood run cold. The casket was empty. Where Sergeant James Reeves should have been lying in his dress uniform adorned with medals and honors, there was nothing but satin lining and a folded American flag. "What is the meaning of this?" Colonel Turner demanded, his military authority cutting through the shocked silence. "Where is Falcon?" Mr. Hargrove's face had gone completely ashen. He stepped back from the casket, bumping into a floral arrangement that toppled to the ground. I can explain," he stammered, though his expression suggested otherwise. Emily stared into the empty casket, her grief momentarily suspended by disbelief. "That's not possible," she whispered. "You told us he was here. You showed us the death certificate Atlas had stopped barking and now stood alert beside Colonel Turner's wheelchair, as if satisfied that his message had finally been received. The dog's intelligent eyes remained fixed on the funeral director, who was now visibly sweating despite the cool rain. "There must be some mistake," Mr. Hargrove said, his voice rising with poorly concealed panic. "Perhaps there was a mix-up in our preparation room. These things sometimes happen in our profession." "A mix-up?" Nathan's voice was dangerously quiet. "You're claiming you simply misplaced a decorated veteran's body?" Murmurs of outrage spread through the mourners. Several of Falcon's fellow rangers moved closer to Mr. Hargrove, their faces set in hard lines. I need to make some calls," the funeral director said, backing away. "Check our records. This is unprecedented." Nathan stepped forward, blocking his retreat. "No one's going anywhere until we get answers. Where is Falcon's body?" Mr. Hargrove's professional demeanor had completely collapsed. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he blurted out. "The circumstances were complicated." Emily approached him, her grief transforming into anger. "What circumstances? You told us my brother died of heart failure in his sleep. Was that a lie too?" The funeral director's eyes darted toward his car in the distance. "Please, let me go to my office. I have the paperwork there. I can sort this out." "I think you should explain right here," Colonel Turner said, wheeling himself closer. "No paperwork, just the truth." A tense silence fell over the gathering as all eyes fixed on Mr. Hargrove. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but thunder still rumbled in the distance, adding a dramatic backdrop to the unfolding scene. I never saw the body," Mr. Hargrove finally admitted, his voice barely audible. "What?" Emily's face drained of color. "I received a call 3 days ago from a man claiming to be from Veterans Affairs," he continued, words tumbling out now. "He had all the proper credentials, paperwork. He said Sergeant Reeves had died of a classified condition related to his service. Something about experimental treatment that went wrong. He insisted on handling the body preparation himself due to some military protocol." Nathan and Colonel Turner exchanged knowing glances. There was no such protocol. "This man," Nathan pressed, "did he give you a name?" Mr. Hargrove shook his head. "He used a government ID. Sullivan, I think. He said due to the classified nature of Sergeant Reeves's condition, there could be no autopsy, no viewing of the body. He delivered what I was told was a sealed casket with the body already inside. I was specifically instructed not to open it under any circumstances." "And you didn't find that suspicious?" Nathan asked incredulously. The funeral director's shoulders slumped. "I've handled military funerals before. Sometimes there are special protocols. And the paperwork looked legitimate. He even had a death certificate signed by a military doctor." "Colonel." Turner's expression darkened. "Which doctor?" "A Dr. Lawrence from Walter Reed." "There is no Dr. Lawrence at Walter Reed," Colonel Turner said flatly. "I had my knee surgery there last year. I know most of the staff." Mr. Hargrove seemed to shrink before their eyes. "I just followed instructions. The man was very convincing, very official. He paid for everything in cash, said it was a military benefit for veterans of certain classified operations." Nathan's mind was racing. Something about this didn't add up. When exactly was Falcon supposed to have died? The exact time? The certificate said 2:15 a.m. 3 days ago. Emily shook her head vigorously. "That's impossible. I spoke to James on the phone at 11 p.m. that night. He was fine. He was excited about his new physical therapy program at the VA. Physical therapy. Nathan's attention snapped to Emily. What for? His old shoulder injury from Afghanistan. He said they were trying some new treatment that was showing promising results. Nathan and Colonel Turner locked eyes again, silent understanding passing between them. Both men knew of classified medical treatments sometimes offered to veterans who had been exposed to experimental programs during their service. Emily, Nathan said carefully, did your brother ever mention a doctor named Whitmore or Project Nightingale? Emily's brow furrowed. Whitmore sounds familiar. James mentioned him once or twice, said he was leading some revolutionary treatment program. But Project Nightingale? No, never heard of that. Colonel Turner's expression had grown grave. Project Nightingale was a classified medical program for veterans who were exposed to certain compounds during special operations. It was supposed to be discontinued 5 years ago after complications. A heavy silence fell over the group. As the implications sank in, Atlas whined softly, sensing the shift in mood. If Falcon was receiving treatment under Project Nightingale, Nathan said slowly, and something went wrong. Someone might want to cover it up, Colonel Turner finished. And what better way than to fake a death from natural causes? Emily's hands flew to her mouth. Are you saying my brother might still be alive? Mr. Hargrove looked desperately from face to face. This is far beyond my expertise. I just arrange funerals. I don't get involved in whatever this is. You're already involved, Nathan said grimly. You were part of this charade, willingly or not. One of the rangers stepped forward, a broad-shouldered man with a face weathered by years in harsh environments. If someone's taken Falcon, we need to find him, now. Nods of agreement came from the other military personnel present. The funeral had transformed into something else entirely, an impromptu rescue mission planning session. Nathan turned to Emily. Do you have access to Falcon's personal effects? His phone, computer, anything that might give us clues about this treatment? He was receiving. She nodded, determination replacing shock on her face. Everything's at his apartment. I have the key. What about Atlas? Colonel Turner asked. How did you end up with him if Falcon was supposedly found dead in his bed? The same man who came. About the funeral arrangements brought Atlas to me the morning after James supposedly died, Emily said, the pieces beginning to fall into place. He said James would have wanted me to take care of his dog. Nathan crouched down to Atlas's level, looking the German shepherd in the eyes. You knew all along, didn't you, boy? You knew that wasn't your owner in there. Atlas nudged Nathan's hand with his nose, as if confirming his suspicion. Service dogs like Atlas are trained to recognize their handlers by scent, Nathan explained, standing again. He knew Falcon wasn't in that casket because he couldn't smell him. Mr. Hargrove had begun to edge away from the group, clearly hoping to escape the situation. Nathan spotted his retreat and signaled to two of the rangers, who moved to block the funeral director's path. I think you should stay with us, Mr. Hargrove, Nathan said. You might remember something else important, and I'm sure the authorities will have questions for you. The funeral director's shoulders slumped in resignation. I really didn't know, he insisted weakly. I was just following what I thought were official instructions. We'll sort that out. Later, Colonel Turner said dismissively. Right now, finding Falcon is our priority. The impromptu search committee quickly organized itself. The military personnel present naturally fell into their roles, with Colonel Turner taking command, despite his wheelchair. We need 3 teams, he announced. one to go to Falcon's apartment and search for clues about this treatment program, another to check the VA hospital where he was last seen, and a third to find out more about this fake VA representative. Emily clutched Atlas's leash, a new hope lighting her eyes. "Do you really think he could be alive?" Nathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I've known your brother for a long time. He survived things that would have killed most men. If anyone could make it through whatever this is, it's Falcon." The rain had stopped completely now, and a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the empty casket in an almost symbolic way. What had begun as a funeral was transforming into a mission of hope. Atlas stood at attention, alert and ready. It was as if the dog understood exactly what was happening and was prepared to lead them to his missing handler. "First things first," Nathan said, his combat medic training kicking in. "We need to establish a timeline. When was Falcon last seen alive by someone other than Emily?" A VA nurse who had attended the funeral stepped forward. "I saw him 2 days ago at his physical therapy appointment, around 7 p.m. He was in good spirits, talking about how he could finally sleep through the night without pain." Nathan nodded, mentally noting the detail. So sometime between 11 p.m. when he called Emily and the next morning when his death was reported, something happened. Colonel Turner wheeled himself to the center of the group. "All right, people, we move out in 15 minutes. Anyone with military or medical background, I want you with us. The rest of you, please keep this quiet for now. If someone went to this much trouble to make us think Falcon was dead, we don't want to tip them off that we know otherwise." Falcon's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a military man. Sparse, organized, and meticulously clean. Emily unlocked the door, and Atlas immediately bounded inside, sniffing frantically as if searching for traces of his missing handler. Nathan, Colonel Turner, and 2 of Falcon's former Ranger teammates followed, their expressions grim with determination. "He kept his important documents in his desk," Emily said, leading them to a small home office area. Medical records, military paperwork, everything. Nathan began methodically searching through the files, while Colonel Turner examined Falcon's laptop. The 2 Rangers, Specialists Cruz and Wilson, swept through the rest of the apartment, looking for anything unusual. "Found his medication," Cruz called from the bathroom. He emerged holding an unmarked prescription bottle with white tablets inside. No pharmacy label, no doctor's name. Nathan took the bottle, examining the pills with a frown. "These aren't standard VA issue. I've never seen anything like this." Colonel Turner looked up from the laptop. "His calendar shows appointments with Dr. Whitmore twice weekly for the past month. Last one was scheduled for yesterday, which obviously he missed if he was supposedly already dead." "Here's something," Nathan said, pulling a file from the bottom drawer. "Medical consent forms for an experimental treatment protocol." He scanned the document quickly, his expression darkening. "This isn't a standard VA form. The letterhead says ARPA H Extension Program, Nightingale Division." "ARPA H?" Emily questioned. "Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, Colonel," Turner explained without looking up from the laptop. "It's legitimate, a government agency for breakthrough medical research. But I've never heard of a Nightingale Division." Nathan continued reading, his medical training helping him parse the dense terminology. This is describing some kind of neural pathway regeneration therapy using targeted nanomedicine. It's supposed to repair nerve damage from combat injuries. But he paused, his brow furrowing deeper. "There's notation here about cognitive enhancement potential and memory augmentation protocols. Wilson, who had been searching Falcon's bedroom, emerged holding a small black notebook. Found this taped to the underside of his nightstand. It's a journal. As Wilson handed over the notebook, Atlas suddenly perked up, rushing to the apartment door with an urgent whine. Emily moved to calm him, but the dog's behavior grew more insistent. "Someone's coming," Cruz whispered, immediately moving to a defensive position beside the door. The others tensed, prepared for confrontation. Footsteps approached in the hallway outside, followed by the sound of a key in the lock. Cruz signaled for everyone to hold position as the door slowly opened. A man in a dark suit stepped inside, freezing when he saw the group waiting for him. He was tall and lean, with the rigid posture of military training despite his civilian clothes. His hand instinctively moved toward his jacket before Cruz stepped forward, weapon already drawn. "Don't," Cruz warned quietly. "Hands where we can see them." The stranger complied, raising his hands slowly. His eyes scanned the room, assessing each person before landing on Atlas, who was growling softly. "Major Sullivan," the man said, addressing Colonel Turner with unexpected familiarity. "I'm surprised to see you here." Colonel Turner's eyes narrowed. "You have me at a disadvantage. You know who I am, but I don't believe we've met." "Agent Thomas Reed, Department of Defense Advanced Medical, Research Oversight. And we have met, sir. Afghanistan, 2009. I was on the extraction team after the Kandahar incident." Recognition flickered across Colonel Turner's face. "You were with the Special Recovery Unit, but you weren't called Reed then." Reed's expression remained neutral. "Names change in our line of work, but my mission remains the same, protecting our soldiers, even from our own mistakes." Nathan stepped forward. "Where's Sergeant Reeves?" Reed's eyes shifted to Nathan, measuring him. "Dr. Westbrook, Distinguished Combat Medic? I've read your file too." He glanced around at the assembled group. "I see Sergeant Reeves's loyal friends have refused to accept the official story. That's commendable, if complicated." "Cut the cryptic bullshit," Cruz snapped, his weapon still trained on Reed. "Where is Falcon?" Reed sighed, seemingly making a decision. "He's alive, for now, but his condition is precarious. That's why we needed to control the narrative." Emily stepped forward, tears threatening. "What happened to my brother?" Project Nightingale was designed to help veterans with neurological injuries, Reed explained, his voice lowering. "Sergeant Reeves was a promising candidate. His shoulder nerve damage was extensive, but localized, making him perfect for the targeted nanomedicine approach. The treatment was working exceptionally well. Too well, in fact." "What does that mean?" Nathan demanded. "The neural regrowth expanded beyond the damaged areas. The nanomedicine began enhancing neural pathways throughout his brain, not just his. Injured nerves, his cognitive functions, memory, processing speed, they all began accelerating beyond normal human parameters." Colonel Turner's expression hardened. "You turned a medical treatment into an enhancement program. Without proper consent," Reed didn't deny it. "The possibilities were too significant to ignore. Imagine soldiers who could process battlefield information instantly, remember every detail of strategic briefings, function optimally, despite extreme stress or sleep deprivation." "But something went wrong," Nathan surmised, his medical mind already connecting the dots. Reed nodded grimly. 3 nights ago, Sergeant Reeves experienced what we first thought was a seizure. When he stabilized, we realized the neural enhancement had triggered something unexpected. He was accessing memories not his own. A stunned silence fell over the room. "Not his own?" Emily finally whispered. "I don't understand." "The nanomedicine was designed to strengthen neural connections," Reed explained. "But in Sergeant Reeves's case, it somehow began forming new ones, connecting him to information he shouldn't have access to. Military operations he was never part of. Classified. Information he was never cleared to know." Nathan's medical mind raced ahead. The nanobots were networking beyond his own neural system, somehow connecting to external data sources. Reed nodded. "Precisely. We believe the nanomedicine established quantum entanglement with our secured military networks. Information was flowing directly into his mind. That's when we had to contain the situation. Officially, Sergeant James Reeves died of heart failure. In reality, he's in a secured medical facility while we try to reverse the process." Atlas growled again, more intensely this time. Emily stroked his head, trying to calm him. "Why fake his death? Why not just tell us he had complications?" "Because this isn't just about medical complications," Reed said gravely. "Sergeant Reeves now has knowledge of some of our most classified operations, past, present, and future. He's become, unintentionally, one of the most significant security risks in the nation." Nathan's eyes narrowed. "You're not trying to help him, you're containing him." Reed didn't deny it. "Both, actually. We're trying to extract the nanomedicine without damaging his brain, but we're also ensuring that classified information stays secure." Colonel Turner wheeled himself directly in front of Reed. "And if you can't extract it, what then?" "The agents." Silence was answer enough. "That's why you staged the funeral," Nathan realized. "You're preparing for the worst-case scenario, where Falcon doesn't survive your treatment." "We're trying to save him," Reed insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "But we have to balance one man's life against national security." Emily stepped forward, her grief transforming into anger. "He's not just one man, he's my brother. He served this country faithfully, and this is how you repay him? By experimenting on him and then disposing of him when things go wrong." Atlas barked sharply, as if emphasizing Emily's words. The dog's intelligent eyes remained fixed on Reed, filled with unmistakable hostility. "We need to see him," Nathan said firmly. "I have extensive experience with neurological trauma. I might be able to help." Reed hesitated, clearly weighing his options. "That's not within my authority to grant." "Then take us to someone who has that authority," Colonel Turner demanded. "Or we can take this public. I'm sure the media would be very interested in how the government is experimenting on veterans and faking their deaths." The threat hung in the air. Reed studied each determined face before him, realizing he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. "If I take you to him," Reed finally said, "you'll need to understand the security implications. What Sergeant Reeves knows. Now it could compromise operations, endanger lives. This isn't just bureaucratic caution." "We'll sign whatever confidentiality agreements you need," Nathan responded. "But we're seeing him today." Reed nodded reluctantly. "I'll need to make some calls." While Reed stepped into the hallway to use his phone, Nathan gathered the others in a tight circle. "We can't trust him completely," he whispered. "Once we find out where Falcon is being held, we need our own plan." Cruz nodded. "I've still got contacts in special operations. If we need extraction, they'll help, official channels or not." "We Need to move carefully, Colonel Turner cautioned. If Falcon really does have classified information in his head, this is more complicated than just breaking him out. Emily clutched Atlas's leash tighter. What about Atlas? He might help James. If he's in distress, they share a special bond. Nathan considered this. Military facilities won't allow a dog in easily, especially not in a classified medical wing. Then we don't tell them he's coming, Wilson suggested. We create a distraction before they could elaborate further. Reed returned, his expression unreadable. My superiors have agreed to let Dr. Westbrook observe Sergeant Reeves's condition, given his expertise. The rest of you will need to remain in a waiting area. That's not good enough, Emily protested. He's my brother. It's non-negotiable, Reed said firmly. Dr. Westbrook has relevant medical expertise. The rest of you don't need to be there from a treatment perspective. Nathan exchanged glances with the others. This wasn't ideal, but it was a start, a way to locate Falcon and assess his true condition. Fine, Nathan agreed reluctantly. When do we leave? Now, Reed answered. There's a secure transport waiting downstairs. Colonel Turner will need to arrange wheelchair accessibility. As they prepared to leave, Nathan crouched beside Atlas, whispering something in the dog's ear while pretending to adjust his collar. The German shepherd's ears perked up attentively. What about the dog? Reed asked, eyeing Atlas warily. He stays with me, Emily insisted. He's all I have left of James right now. Reed frowned but didn't argue further. Let's move quickly, Sergeant. Reeves's condition has been fluctuating. As they filed out of the apartment, Nathan caught Colonel Turner's eye, a silent message passing between them. They were going in, but they were also preparing for the possibility that they might need to get Falcon out, regardless of official approval. The secure medical facility was disguised as a private research hospital on the outskirts of the city. Its unassuming exterior gave no hint of the classified operations conducted within its walls. Two armed guards in civilian clothes met their convoy in the underground parking garage, their watchful eyes scanning each member of the group as they exited the vehicles. The dog stays in the vehicle, one of the guards stated firmly when he spotted Atlas. Emily tightened her grip on the leash. He goes where I go. Reed stepped between them. The dog remains in the secure waiting area with the others. Those are the terms my superiors agreed to. Nathan placed a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder. It's okay. I'll find James and assess his condition. Then we'll figure out next steps. Emily reluctantly nodded, though Atlas whined softly, his intelligent eyes fixed on Nathan as if understanding the unspoken plan. Colonel Turner wheeled himself next to Emily, his military bearing commanding even from a seated position. We'll be waiting, he told Nathan, his tone carrying significant weight. Keep your phone on. The guards escorted Nathan, Reed, and a senior medical officer, a stern-looking woman introduced only as Dr. Keller, into an elevator requiring both keycard and biometric access. As they descended several floors below ground level, Nathan's mind raced with possibilities. His medical training told him that neural nanomedicine was still largely theoretical. To have a functioning program already in human trials suggested technology far beyond what was publicly known. Dr. Westbrook, Keller spoke abruptly, breaking the tense silence. What do you know about quantum entanglement in biological systems? Nathan measured his response carefully. Only theoretical applications. It's been proposed for targeted drug delivery, cellular repair, and neural interface technology. Nothing beyond experimental stages in controlled laboratory settings. Keller's expression remained impassive. Project Nightingale moved beyond theoretical stages 3 years ago. Sergeant Reeves is our 17th subject, but the first to experience this particular anomaly. You mean he's the first to access classified information he shouldn't have? Nathan clarified, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Reed shot him a warning glance, but Keller merely nodded. Precisely. The previous subjects experienced enhanced cognitive function, accelerated healing, improved memory retention, all within expected parameters. Sergeant Reeves is an outlier. The elevator doors opened to reveal a corridor that looked more like a high-security military installation than a hospital. Armed guards stood at regular intervals, and secure doors required multiple clearance protocols. Our working theory, Keller continued as they walked, is that Sergeant Reeves's unique neural architecture created unexpected quantum connections with our secure networks. The nanobots were designed to form new neural pathways within his brain. Instead, they formed pathways beyond it. They stopped before a reinforced door marked only with the number 17. Through a small observation window, Nathan could see a standard hospital room transformed into a secure containment unit. Scientific equipment surrounded a medical bed where a figure lay, partially visible. Before we enter, Reed said, his voice low, you need to understand something. When we say he's accessing classified information, we don't just mean he knows things. He's experiencing operations in real time, past, present, and even those still in planning stages. His consciousness is somehow connected to our entire military network. Nathan's mind struggled to process the implications. That's not possible. 3 days ago, we would have agreed with you, Keller said, swiping her access card. Now we have a sergeant who can describe in perfect detail a classified operation happening right now in a country whose name I'm not even cleared to know. An operation he was never part of. The door hissed open, and Nathan steeled himself for what awaited inside. Despite the preparation, the sight of James Falcon Reeves shocked him deeply. Falcon lay on the hospital bed, electrodes attached to his head and chest, monitoring equipment surrounding him. His eyes were open but unfocused, darting rapidly as if tracking movement only he could see. Occasionally his lips moved, muttering coordinates, names, and military jargon. Despite being physically restrained, his body periodically tensed as if responding to unseen threats. My God, Nathan whispered, approaching slowly. James, Falcon, can you hear me? Falcon's head turned slightly at the sound of Nathan's voice, but his eyes didn't focus. Instead, he began speaking rapidly. Sierra Team, 3 tangos at your 9 o'clock. Explosive device detected in the eastern corridor. Authorization code Echo Tango 792. He's monitoring an operation in real time, Reed explained, quietly. Somewhere in the Middle East. An operation he has no connection to and no knowledge of. Nathan moved closer, his medical training taking over as he checked Falcon's vital signs on the monitors. His cortisol levels are through the roof, heart rate elevated, blood pressure dangerously high. You're keeping him sedated. Minimal sedation, Keller replied. Too much interferes with the neural activity we're trying to study. We're managing his symptoms pharmaceutically while working on extraction protocols for the nanomedicine. Nathan examined the IV bags and medication chart. These dosages are barely keeping him stable. He's experiencing the stress of multiple combat operations simultaneously. The human mind isn't designed to process this kind of input. That's precisely our concern, Keller acknowledged. If we can't extract the nanomedicine soon. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Nathan understood the implications all too well. The constant flood of intense experiences would eventually cause complete neural collapse. I need to see his complete medical file, Nathan demanded. All. The data on the nanomedicine, the initial treatment protocols, everything. Reed hesitated, but Keller nodded. You'll need to review it here in our secure room. Nothing leaves this facility. While Keller retrieved the files, Nathan moved closer to Falcon, speaking softly near his ear. James, it's Nathan. We know you're in there. We're going to help you. Emily is here and Atlas too. They're waiting for you. At the mention of Atlas, a change came over Falcon. His rapid eye movements slowed momentarily, and he turned his head more deliberately toward Nathan's voice. Atlas, he whispered, the name emerging with unusual clarity amidst his otherwise fragmented speech. Nathan felt a surge of hope. That's right, Atlas. Your dog. He knew something was wrong. He's the one who alerted us. Reed watched the interaction with interest. Remarkable. That's the first coherent response to external stimuli we've observed since he was brought in. The bond between service dogs and their handlers is profound, Nathan explained, his mind racing with possibilities. It operates on multiple levels, emotional, psychological, even physiological. Their heart rates synchronize, their stress responses align. It's why service dogs are so effective for veterans with PTSD. An idea began forming in Nathan's mind. Before he could develop it further, Keller returned with a secure tablet containing Falcon's medical files. You have 1 hour to review these, she said. After that, we'll need to discuss your assessment and recommendations. Nathan nodded and began scrolling through the extensive documentation. The technical specifications of the nanomedicine were beyond cutting edge, quantum-enabled neural interfaces designed to repair damaged nerve pathways by creating new connections at the cellular level. In theory, the technology was brilliant. In practice, it had opened a Pandora's box. As he read deeper, troubling details emerged. The consent forms Falcon had signed were deliberately vague, describing only the potential benefits for his shoulder injury without mentioning the cognitive enhancement aspects. Notes from Dr. Whitmore revealed that Falcon had been selected specifically because his psychological profile suggested he could handle accelerated neural processing. He was being evaluated as a potential candidate for something called Phase 2, even before the unexpected connection to classified networks occurred. You were planning to weaponize this technology all along, Nathan said, looking up at Keller with undisguised disgust. The medical applications were just a cover to test military applications. Keller's expression remained clinical. The technology has dual purposes. Healing injured veterans was always a primary goal. But yes, enhancing operational capabilities was part of the long-term vision. Did James know that? Reed and Keller exchanged glances. Their silence was answer enough. Nathan turned back to Falcon, who had begun muttering a new string of coordinates and operational details. How much time does he have if we can't extract the nanomedicine? At the current rate of neural deterioration, Keller replied with clinical detachment, approximately 72 hours before irreversible damage occurs. Perhaps 96 before complete system failure. And your extraction protocol. What's its current success rate? Another uncomfortable silence followed. You don't have one that works, do you? Nathan realized, anger rising in his voice. That's why you staged his death. You're preparing for failure. We have several promising approaches, Keller insisted defensively, but the unexpected quantum entanglement has complicated matters significantly. The nanobots have integrated with his neural pathways more completely than anticipated. Nathan returned to the medical data, searching for anything that might help. Among the monitoring data, he noticed something interesting: periodic fluctuations in Falcon's brainwave patterns that corresponded with moments of relative clarity. Has he had any visitors since being brought here? Nathan asked. Anyone he responded to? Only medical personnel, Reed replied. We've maintained strict isolation protocols. Nathan pointed to the brainwave data. Look at these moments of heightened alpha wave activity. They indicate brief periods where he's more present, more himself. What was happening during these periods? Keller examined the timestamps. Nothing unusual in our logs. Standard monitoring, medication administration. A theory was forming in Nathan's mind. I want to try something. I want to bring his dog in. Absolutely not, Reed responded immediately. This is a sterile, secure environment. Atlas is a trained service animal, Nathan countered. Perfectly clean, perfectly disciplined, and he might be the key to reaching James's consciousness beneath all this neural noise. Keller looked intrigued, despite her clinical demeanor. What's your hypothesis, Dr. Westbrook? The nanomedicine creates and strengthens neural connections, right? James and Atlas have a profound existing neural connection, one established over years of close companionship. If anything can help James distinguish his own consciousness from the flood of external information, it would be that primal emotional connection to his dog. Reed shook his head. It's too risky from a security perspective. Riskier than losing him completely? Nathan challenged. You have less than 3 days before irreversible damage. What do you have to lose? Keller and Reed stepped aside, conferring. In hushed tones, Nathan used the opportunity to lean close to Falcon again. Hold on, James, he whispered. We're working on a plan. Atlas is going to help you find your way back. Falcon's eyes briefly focused on Nathan's face before darting away again, pulled back into whatever distant operation his mind was witnessing. But for that fleeting moment, Nathan had seen recognition, and that was enough to convince him they were on the right track. After intense negotiation, Keller reluctantly agreed to Nathan's request, though Reed remained adamantly opposed. As they prepared the necessary security protocols to bring Atlas into the facility, Nathan was permitted to return to the waiting area to brief the others. The tension in the room was palpable when Nathan entered. Emily immediately jumped to her feet while Colonel Turner wheeled forward, his military bearing more pronounced than ever. Cruz and Wilson, positioned near the door, remained vigilantly alert. He's alive, Nathan confirmed, before anyone could ask, bringing visible relief to Emily's face. But his condition is complicated. Atlas perked up at Nathan's arrival, his tail wagging tentatively, as if sensing news about his handler. Nathan crouched beside the German shepherd, scratching behind his ears while surveying the rest of the group. The nanomedicine they used to treat his shoulder injury has created an unexpected side effect, he explained, choosing his words carefully in the potentially monitored space. It's formed connections beyond his own neural system. He's experiencing information overload. Colonel Turner's expression darkened with understanding. How severe? Critical, Nathan replied grimly. They estimate 72 hours before permanent damage occurs. They're working on extraction protocols, but nothing has been successful yet. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Can we see him? That's why I'm here. I've convinced them to let Atlas in. I believe the strong emotional connection between them might help stabilize James's condition long enough to develop a solution. Cruz and Wilson exchanged knowing glances. What's the real plan? Cruz asked quietly. Nathan leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Atlas is our best chance at reaching James's consciousness beneath all the noise. If we can establish that connection, we might create a window of clarity where he can help us understand what's happening. And then, Colonel Turner prompted. One step at a time, Nathan cautioned. First, we need to assess whether James can be moved without risking his condition. If extraction isn't possible here, we may need alternatives. Emily clutched Atlas's leash tighter. Whatever it takes, I'm not losing my brother again. Nathan nodded, then turned to Colonel Turner. I need you to make some calls. If we have to move quickly, we'll need medical transport capabilities outside official channels. The colonel nodded in understanding. I still have contacts who don't. Ask questions. Good. Cruz, Wilson, stay alert. If things go south, we may need to create a distraction. Nathan stood, taking Atlas's leash from Emily. They're only allowing Atlas and me in for now. I'll update you as soon as I can. Emily hugged the dog fiercely before releasing him. Bring him back to us, Atlas, she whispered into his fur. The German shepherd licked her cheek once, as if making a promise. Reed was waiting outside the door, his expression tense. The dog will be thoroughly scanned before entering the secure area, he stated flatly. Any unusual behavior, and this experiment ends immediately. Atlas is a trained service animal, Nathan reminded him. His behavior is impeccable. Security protocols were even more stringent for Atlas than they had been for the humans. The dog endured multiple scans with remarkable patience, standing perfectly still as sensors swept over his body. Nathan wondered if Atlas somehow understood the gravity of the situation. The dog's focused intensity suggested an awareness beyond typical canine comprehension. Finally cleared, they were escorted back to room 17, where Falcon remained in the same state of disconnected consciousness, his lips continuing to murmur operational details and coordinates. Dr. Keller stood monitoring his vital signs, which still showed dangerous elevations in heart rate and blood pressure. Remember, Reed warned, at the first sign of any security concern, the dog leaves. Nathan ignored him, instead focusing on Atlas. The German shepherd had frozen at the threshold, his eyes locked on Falcon. A small whine escaped his throat. Not of distress, but recognition. It's okay, boy, Nathan encouraged softly. Go to him. With deliberate steps, Atlas approached the bed. Falcon's speech pattern suddenly faltered, his rapid eye movements slowing momentarily as if some distant part of him sensed the dog's presence. Atlas reached the bedside and gently rested his muzzle on the edge of the mattress, inches from Falcon's restrained hand. The monitors registered an immediate change, a slight but significant decrease in heart rate and blood pressure. Keller moved closer, her clinical detachment momentarily broken by scientific curiosity. Remarkable, she murmured. That's the first physiological improvement we've seen since he arrived. Atlas whined again, more insistently this time. Nathan noticed. Falcon's fingers twitching, as if trying to reach for the dog despite the restraints. I want to release his right hand, Nathan said. Let him touch Atlas. Reed began to protest, but Keller overruled him. The potential benefits outweigh the security concerns. We need any advantage we can get. Nathan carefully unfastened the restraint on Falcon's right wrist. Almost immediately, his hand moved toward Atlas, fingers trembling with effort. When they finally connected with the dog's fur, the change was dramatic. Falcon's whole body seemed to relax slightly, and his scattered speech slowed. Atlas leaned into the touch, his training allowing him to remain perfectly still, despite his evident desire to get closer to his handler. On the monitors, Falcon's brainwave patterns began shifting toward more normal patterns, alpha waves increasing as the chaotic beta activity decreased. "Atlas," Falcon whispered, the name emerging with remarkable clarity amid his otherwise fragmented speech. "Good boy." Nathan moved closer, encouraged by this breakthrough. "James, can you hear me? It's Nathan." Falcon's eyes, still darting but slower now, struggled to focus on Nathan's face. "Nathan, what's happening to me?" "You're experiencing the effects of the nanomedicine treatment for your shoulder," Nathan explained calmly. "It's created some unexpected neural connections. We're working on helping you." Falcon's face contorted with confusion and pain. "So many voices, operations, I can see them all. Kandahar, Tehran, places I've never been." "I know. The nanomedicine has somehow connected your mind to classified networks. Your consciousness is experiencing multiple operations simultaneously." Falcon's fingers tightened in Atlas's fur, as if anchoring himself through the connection. "Help me," he whispered. "Can't separate. Which thoughts are mine?" Atlas whined softly, pressing his muzzle against Falcon's arm. The dog's presence seemed to provide a focal point for Falcon's scattered consciousness, something real and emotionally significant to hold on to amidst the chaos of information flooding his mind. Nathan glanced at the monitors, noting that while Falcon's condition had improved, his vital signs were still dangerously elevated. "James, we need to understand what's happening so we can help you. Do you remember Dr. Whitmore? The treatment for your shoulder?" Falcon nodded weakly. "Shoulder first, then. They wanted more. Combat enhancement. I didn't agree to that." Keller stepped forward, unable to contain her scientific curiosity. "Sergeant Reeves, can you describe when you first noticed connecting to external information sources?" Falcon's eyes darted toward her voice, struggling to focus. "3 nights ago. Dreams at first, then awake. Operations happening now, operations from years ago, some that haven't happened yet." "Future operations?" Reed interjected sharply. "That's not possible. He can't access planning scenarios." Falcon's expression tensed, his free hand gripping Atlas's fur tighter. "Arlington meeting, November 30th, Operation Winterfall, 3-stage infiltration of—" "Stop!" Reed cut him off abruptly. "That information is classified beyond top secret. It hasn't been fully authorized yet." Nathan shot Reed a warning glance. "You're agitating him. His vital signs are spiking again." Indeed, the monitors showed Falcon's heart rate and blood pressure climbing once more. His speech began fragmenting back into disconnected operational details, his brief moment of clarity slipping away. Atlas sensed the change immediately. The dog moved closer, pressing his body against the bed rail, trying to maintain contact with his handler. Remarkably, Falcon responded to this, his vital signs stabilizing somewhat, though not returning to the improved levels they'd achieved moments before. The quantum entanglement must be creating temporal anomalies in the information flow. Keller theorized, fascination overcoming her professional reserve. Past, present, future, all accessible simultaneously through the neural network. Nathan kept his focus on Falcon, not the scientific implications. James, stay with us. Focus on Atlas. He's real. He's here right now. Falcon's eyes found the dog again, and something like recognition flickered across his face. Atlas, he repeated, the name serving as an anchor. My dog. That's right, Nathan encouraged. Stay with that thought. Your dog, your connection to him is real. For nearly a minute, Falcon seemed to stabilize, his consciousness partially breaking through the chaos. Then, without warning, his body went rigid, his back arching against the restraints as monitors blared with alarms. "He's seizing!" Nathan shouted, immediately moving to protect Falcon's airway. "Get me 10 milligrams of diazepam, now!" Atlas barked urgently, distressed by his handler's condition, but maintaining his trained position. Keller rushed to administer the medication, while Reed backed away, concern for security momentarily overshadowed by the medical emergency. The seizure lasted 38 seconds, an eternity in medical terms. When Falcon's body finally relaxed, his consciousness had retreated even further, his mumbled speech now barely audible, his eyes moving more rapidly than before. His neural activity is spiking in multiple regions simultaneously, Keller reported, studying the brain scans. The brief period of coherence may have triggered a cascade effect. Nathan checked Falcon's pupils, which showed delayed response. His condition is deteriorating faster than you projected. We don't have 72 hours. I'd estimate 36 at most before permanent damage. Keller's professional composure cracked slightly. Our extraction protocols need at least 48 hours of preparation. Then we need alternatives, Nathan insisted. The connection with Atlas helped stabilize him temporarily. We need to build on that. Atlas remained pressed against the bed, his focus on Falcon unwavering despite the chaotic activity around them. The dog's dedication gave Nathan an idea. "What if we fight quantum with quantum?" he proposed suddenly. "You said the nanomedicine established quantum entanglement with your networks. What if we could redirect that entanglement to something else, something safer?" Keller looked skeptical. "Theoretically possible, but we have no mechanism to—" "We do," Nathan interrupted, pointing to Atlas. The emotional connection between James and his dog created measurable changes in his neural patterns. There's already a form of entanglement there, not quantum in the technical sense, but a profound neurological and emotional connection established over years of companionship. Reed shook his head dismissively. "You're suggesting we somehow transfer quantum entanglement from classified military networks to a dog?" "I'm suggesting we give James's consciousness something stronger to latch onto than the flood of classified information," Nathan clarified. "We need to amplify the existing neural connection between him and Atlas." Keller's scientific curiosity was clearly piqued. "How would you propose doing that?" Nathan thought quickly. "The nanomedicine responds to neural pathways, strengthening existing connections and forming new ones. If we could temporarily enhance Atlas's neural output, perhaps with a controlled dose of neurotransmitter enhancers, while maintaining physical contact between them, we might create a stronger connection for Sergeant Reeves to focus on," Keller finished, already considering the possibilities. It could potentially override the external connections temporarily. Long enough to attempt an extraction of the nanomedicine, Nathan concluded. or at least stabilize him enough that we can transport him to a facility better equipped for the procedure. Reed looked increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. This discussion is moving beyond authorized parameters. I need to consult with my superiors before any experimental procedures are implemented. As Reed stepped away to make his call, Nathan exchanged a meaningful glance with Keller. The scientist in her was clearly intrigued by the theoretical possibilities, regardless of official protocols. How quickly could you prepare a safe neurotransmitter enhancer for Atlas? Nathan asked quietly. For a canine his size and breed. Perhaps 2 hours, she replied. But without authorization, James doesn't have time for bureaucratic delays. Nathan cut in. You know as well as I do that his condition is critical, and I suspect your superiors are more concerned with containing the classified information than saving his life. Keller didn't deny it. She glanced at Falcon's monitors, her scientific integrity clearly wrestling with protocol. I'll need access to the pharmaceutical lab. Nathan nodded, then turned his attention back to Atlas, who remained steadfastly beside, his handler despite the chaos. The dog's unwavering loyalty might be Falcon's only hope, if they could act quickly enough. While Reed was occupied with his superiors, Nathan took the opportunity to return to the waiting area. The moment he entered, Emily jumped to her feet, her eyes searching his face for news. Atlas is with him, Nathan reported quickly. There was a brief connection. James recognized him, spoke coherently for a moment. Thank God, Emily whispered, tears forming. Can I see him now? Nathan shook his head grimly. His condition is worse than they initially thought. He had a seizure shortly after that moment of clarity. We're working on a treatment approach, but we need to move fast. Colonel Turner wheeled closer, his military, mind already processing contingencies. How much time? 36 hours at most, before permanent damage, Nathan replied, lowering his voice. I've proposed using Atlas as a focal point for James's consciousness, creating a stronger neural connection that might override the military network entanglement temporarily. And Reed? Colonel Turner asked, instantly grasping the security implications. Currently seeking authorization, which means we need our own plan in motion. Nathan turned to Cruz and Wilson. Are your contacts ready if we need them? Cruz nodded. 3 former Rangers on standby. They have medical transport capabilities and a secure location prepared. Good, because I don't think Reed will get authorization for my approach. His superiors are more concerned with containing the classified information than saving James. Emily's expression hardened. So, we're breaking him out? Only if necessary, Nathan cautioned. Moving him in his current state carries significant risks. I'm working with Dr. Keller on a temporary stabilization method using Atlas. If it works, we'll have a better chance of transporting him safely. Can we trust Keller? Colonel Turner asked skeptically. She's a scientist first, military second. The theoretical challenge has her intrigued enough that she might bend some rules, but we can't count on it. Wilson, who had been quietly monitoring the hallway, returned to the group. Reed's on his way back, doesn't look happy. Here's the plan, Nathan said quickly. I'm going back in with Atlas. Colonel, get your transport ready. We may need to move quickly. Emily, I need you to create a distraction if necessary. What? A kind of distraction? She asked, determination replacing fear in her eyes. A medical emergency might work. Cruz and Wilson can escort you as concerned family members. The more chaos, the better our chances if we need to move James. The door opened, and Reed entered, his expression confirming Nathan's suspicions. "Request denied," he announced tersely. "The dog needs to leave the facility immediately. Dr. Keller has been reassigned to another project team." Nathan kept his face neutral despite the setback. The connection with Atlas was helping. "Surely your superiors can see the potential benefit, the potential security risk outweighs any theoretical benefit," Reed interrupted. "New specialists are being flown in to handle Sergeant Reeves's case. They'll arrive in approximately 6 hours." "What kind of specialists?" Colonel Turner demanded. Reed's hesitation spoke volumes. "Containment specialists." Emily stepped forward, anger flashing in her eyes. "Containment? My brother isn't a security breach to be contained. He's a human being who served his country. Faithfully." "I understand your frustration, Ms. Reeves," Reed replied with practiced sympathy. "But your brother's condition has created unprecedented security concerns. The nanomedicine has given him access to information that could compromise national security at the highest levels. And if these specialists can't extract the nanomedicine," Nathan pressed. "What then?" Reed's silence was answer enough. "Colonel." Turner wheeled forward, decades of military authority evident in his bearing. "I've seen this before, Reed. Sacrificing soldiers to protect operations, calling it necessary collateral damage. Not this time." Reed's posture stiffened. "With all due respect, Colonel, you don't have the security clearance to understand the full implications. If the information in Sergeant Reeves's mind were to be compromised—" "He's not trying to compromise anything!" Emily exclaimed. "He's fighting for his life!" "Nevertheless," Reed continued firmly, "I have my orders. Dr. Westbrook, you're to return Atlas to Ms. Reeves and leave the facility immediately. Your consultation is officially terminated." Nathan saw Cruz and Wilson subtly shift positions, ready to act if needed. Colonel Turner caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Their backup plan was now in motion. "At least, let me say goodbye to James," Nathan requested, buying time. "And Atlas, too. The connection was helping stabilize him, even temporarily." Reed hesitated, then checked his watch. 5 minutes, then you all need to leave." Nathan took Atlas's leash and followed Reed back toward room 17, his mind racing through options. In the brief time he'd been gone, Falcon's condition had visibly deteriorated. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and the monitors showed dangerous spikes in neurological activity. Dr. Keller was nowhere to be seen, replaced by 2 unfamiliar medical personnel who barely acknowledged Nathan's arrival. Atlas whined anxiously, sensing the change in his handler's condition. 5 minutes, Reed reminded him, standing vigilantly by the door. Nathan led Atlas to Falcon's bedside, where the dog immediately pressed his muzzle against Falcon's limp hand. Even in his deteriorated state, Falcon responded slightly to the contact, his fingers twitching as if trying to grip Atlas's fur. Leaning close, Nathan spoke directly into Falcon's ear, his voice barely above a whisper. "James, if you can hear me, we're not giving up on you. Help is coming. Stay with us." As he straightened, Nathan noticed something on the medical counter, a small vial and syringe left behind in what appeared to be Keller's hasty reassignment. The label was obscured, but Nathan recognized the distinctive amber color of the solution inside, the neurotransmitter enhancer Keller had discussed. With Reed's attention momentarily diverted by a message on his phone, Nathan made a split-second decision. He palmed the vial and syringe, concealing them in his pocket while pretending to adjust Atlas's service vest. "Time's up," Reed announced, returning his phone to his pocket. "Say your goodbyes." Nathan patted Atlas, whispering instructions. The dog seemed to understand, despite their impossibility. Then he addressed Falcon one last time, loud enough for Reed to hear. "We'll be waiting for you, James. Stay strong." In the hallway, Nathan could see the increasing security presence. Additional guards had been posted, and medical personnel were moving with heightened urgency. Whatever containment specialists meant, the facility was preparing for their arrival. When they returned to the waiting area, Nathan immediately sensed the tension. Emily's face was flushed with anger, while Colonel Turner's military calm had an edge of steel beneath it. "They're removing us from the visitor registry," Colonel Turner reported quietly, "erasing all record that we were ever here." Nathan nodded grimly. "Then we're going with our backup plan." Reed, who had followed them into the waiting area, gestured toward the exit. "Security will escort you to your vehicles. I'm sorry we couldn't be more helpful." As they gathered their belongings, Nathan surreptitiously passed the vial and syringe to Colonel Turner, who concealed them in a compartment in his wheelchair. Emily collected Atlas's leash, the dog staying unusually close to her side. The group was silent as security personnel led them through a series of checkpoints toward the surface. In the elevator, Nathan caught Cruz's eye and gave a subtle signal. 3 fingers tapped against his leg, phase 3 of their contingency plan. As they reached the ground floor lobby, Emily suddenly clutched her chest and collapsed to her knees, gasping dramatically for breath. The security guards immediately rushed to her aid, momentarily distracted. "My medication," Emily gasped, pointing vaguely toward her purse, which had scattered its contents across the floor. "Heart condition, need my pills," the commotion provided. Just enough cover for Wilson to slip away, unnoticed in the confusion. Nathan helped the guards assist Emily, maintaining the distraction while Colonel Turner engaged the remaining security personnel with demands for medical assistance. Minutes later, alarm klaxons began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency. Lights flashed, and security guards received urgent communications through their earpieces. "Breach in Sector 7, one guard reported tensely. "All available personnel respond immediately." Sector 7, exactly where Room 17 was located. Wilson had succeeded in creating the necessary diversion. The guards escorting them were clearly torn between their original assignment and the facility-wide alert. After a brief radio conversation, the senior guard made a decision. "Johnson, get these civilians out immediately. Everyone else with me to Sector 7. As the majority of security rushed toward the emergency, a single guard remained to escort them out. Nathan exchanged glances with Cruz, who moved casually to position himself between the guard and Colonel Turner. The moment they reached the parking garage, Cruz acted swiftly. A precise strike to the guard's neck rendered him unconscious before he could react. Wilson appeared from behind a concrete pillar, helping Cruz secure the guard while Nathan retrieved the vial and syringe from Colonel Turner's wheelchair. 30 seconds before the next security sweep, Wilson reported, checking his watch. "Transport is in position at the east emergency exit." "What about James?" Emily asked anxiously. "How are we getting him out?" Nathan pointed to Atlas, who stood alert and ready. "That's where our four-legged friend comes in." From Atlas's service vest, Nathan removed a small device, a modified tracking beacon disguised as a medical alert tag. This will remotely disable the security locks on Room 17. Atlas knows the way back to James. We trained service dogs to navigate complex environments and return to their handlers. Emily's eyes widened in understanding. That's what you were whispering to him, but how will he get James out? He won't. He'll lead our extraction team to him. Nathan activated the beacon and attached it securely to Atlas's collar. Cruz, give him the command. Cruz knelt before the German Shepherd, speaking a series of precise commands in the specific tone used during service dog training. Atlas's posture changed immediately, his entire demeanor shifting to focused work mode. "Find James," Cruz ordered, firmly, pointing toward the facility entrance. Without hesitation, Atlas bolted toward a service door, disappearing into the building just as alarms began blaring with renewed urgency. "Now we move," Nathan directed, helping Colonel Turner into the waiting medical transport van. "The extraction team will meet us at the rendezvous point." As Cruz drove them away from the facility, Emily turned to Nathan, fear and hope battling in her expression. Will it work? Can they really get him out? Nathan watched the facility receding in the rearview mirror, emergency vehicles already converging on the main entrance. Atlas will find James, and our team will follow. The neurotransmitter enhancer should create a strong enough connection between them to temporarily stabilize James for transport. And then we fight to bring him back completely. Nathan's expression hardened with determination. "They tried to use your brother as a weapon, Emily. Instead, they're going to learn that loyalty is a force more powerful than any technology they've created." As their van disappeared into traffic, Nathan silently calculated the odds against them. They were challenging a classified government program with nothing but determination, medical knowledge, and the unwavering loyalty of a service dog. It would have seemed impossible odds to most, but Nathan had served alongside James, Falcon Reeves. He'd seen him survive situations that should have been certain death, and he'd witnessed firsthand the remarkable bond between a veteran and his service dog, a connection that transcended simple companionship to become something profound and unbreakable. If anything could guide Falcon back from the neural abyss, it would be that bond. Now they just needed time for the rescue team to reach him and for Atlas to work his unique magic. The rendezvous point was an abandoned veterinary clinic 20 miles outside the city. Its isolated location and medical equipment made it ideal for their needs. Nathan paced anxiously, checking his watch every few minutes, while Emily sat rigid with tension, her eyes fixed on the clinic's rear entrance. "They should have been here by now," she whispered, her voice strained. Colonel Turner, who had been making calls from a secured satellite phone, rejoined the group. "My contact at the Pentagon confirms increased activity at the facility. They've initiated full lockdown protocols." Cruz and Wilson exchanged grim looks. "That makes extraction significantly more difficult," Cruz noted. "But not impossible," Wilson countered. "Remember Kandahar? We got out with half the Taliban searching for us." Nathan checked the medical supplies they'd prepared. IV stands, monitoring equipment, medications gathered through Colonel Turner's extensive network. Everything was ready except for the patient himself. Dr. Keller's neurotransmitter enhancer is our best chance, Nathan explained, organizing syringes on a sterile tray. If Atlas can maintain physical contact with James during transport, it should help stabilize his neural patterns enough to prevent further deterioration. "And after that?" Emily asked, her voice small but determined. Nathan met her gaze honestly. "We attempt a controlled extraction of the nanomedicine. It's never been done outside the program, but I've studied the protocols in James's file. With the right equipment, he was interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching at high speed. Everyone tensed, Crews and Wilson immediately moving to defensive positions with weapons drawn. Colonel Turner wheeled himself to the surveillance monitor, relaxing slightly at what he saw. "It's them," he confirmed. Extraction successful. The clinic's rear doors burst open as 3 men in tactical gear rushed in, carrying a gurney between them. Atlas bounded in ahead of them, barking urgently. On the gurney lay Falcon, unconscious and alarmingly pale, but alive. A makeshift medical monitoring system had been attached to his chest, its readings flashing critical warnings. Nathan sprang into action, directing the team to transfer Falcon to the prepared medical bed. "How long has he been unconscious?" "Since extraction," reported one of the men, a former combat medic named Rodriguez. "Had to sedate him when the alarms triggered. He started seizing again when we moved him." Atlas refused to leave Falcon's side, pressing against the bed with unwavering focus. Nathan quickly assessed Falcon's condition, while Emily stood frozen in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth at the sight of her brother's deteriorated state. "Pupillary response is minimal," Nathan noted, shining a penlight into Falcon's eyes. "Heartbeat irregular, blood pressure dangerously elevated. We need to establish the neural connection with Atlas immediately." Working swiftly, Nathan prepared the neurotransmitter enhancer, calculating the precise dosage for Atlas's size and weight. The German Shepherd remained perfectly still as Nathan administered the injection, never taking his eyes off Falcon. "This will take effect within minutes," Nathan explained, securing an IV line into Falcon's arm. "Atlas's neural activity will amplify, potentially creating a stronger connection that Falcon's consciousness can latch onto." Rodriguez looked skeptical. "You really think a dog can override quantum entanglement with classified military networks?" "It's not just any connection," Nathan replied, carefully removing the restraints from Falcon's right arm. "The bond between service dogs and their handlers operates on multiple levels: neurological, physiological, emotional. These animals are trained to respond to subtle changes in their handler's condition, creating feedback loops that synchronize their nervous systems over time." He guided Atlas closer, helping the dog place his head directly under Falcon's now free hand. Add the neurotransmitter enhancer, and we're essentially creating a stronger signal for Falcon's consciousness to tune into amidst all the noise. The extraction team had positioned guards at all entrances, while Crews and Wilson coordinated perimeter security. Colonel Turner continued monitoring communications frequencies, tracking the military's response to Falcon's disappearance. "They've established roadblocks within a 50-mile radius," he reported grimly, "and they've mobilized surveillance drones. We have perhaps 2 hours before they expand the search to this area." Emily had finally approached her brother's bedside, tears streaming silently down her face. He looked so lost. "He's fighting his way back," Nathan assured her, carefully adjusting the IV drip, delivering a stabilizing cocktail of medications. "Atlas will help guide him." The minutes ticked by in tense silence as they watched for any sign of improvement. Atlas remained perfectly positioned, his body pressed against the bed, his head under Falcon's limp hand. Occasionally, the dog would whine softly, as if communicating with his handler on some level beyond human perception. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, changes began to appear on the monitoring equipment. Falcon's erratic heartbeat steadied slightly. His blood pressure, while still elevated, stopped spiking to dangerous levels. Most encouragingly, his brain activity began to show more organized patterns, the chaotic spikes giving way to more rhythmic waves. "It's working," Nathan confirmed, studying the readings closely. The connection with Atlas is creating a focal point for his consciousness. As if in response to Nathan's words, Falcon's fingers twitched, then curled slightly into Atlas's fur. The dog whined again, more insistently this time, his tail giving a single hopeful wag. "James," Emily called softly, taking her brother's other hand. "Can you hear me?" Falcon's eyelids fluttered, struggling against the heavy sedation still in his system. His lips moved soundlessly at first, then formed a single word. "Atlas." Nathan quickly adjusted the medications, reducing the sedation while maintaining the drug stabilizing Falcon's neural activity. "James, it's Nathan. You're safe. Now, we've removed you from the facility. Atlas is here with you." Falcon's eyes opened briefly, unfocused but seeking. When they found Atlas, something shifted in his expression. Recognition, connection. "Good boy," he whispered hoarsely, his fingers tightening slightly in the dog's fur. Emily sobbed with relief, squeezing her brother's hand. "We're all here, James. We're going to help you." For a moment, Falcon seemed present, his consciousness breaking through the chaos. Then his body suddenly tensed, his back arching slightly as the monitors blared warnings. "Neural cascade," Nathan announced tensely, rushing to administer additional medication. The connection triggered another memory surge. Atlas barked once, sharply, pressing his body more firmly against the bed. Remarkably, Falcon responded to the sound, his body relaxing slightly, though the monitors still showed dangerous levels of neural activity. "Echo team, under fire, coordinates," Falcon began muttering, his speech fragmenting into operational details once more. His eyes had taken on that distant quality again, seeing operations happening far beyond the clinic walls. Nathan turned to Rodriguez. "We need to begin the nanomedicine extraction immediately. We can't wait any longer." Rodriguez looked doubtful. "Without proper equipment, the risks are lower than doing nothing," Nathan cut in firmly. "At the current rate of neural deterioration, we have maybe 12 hours before permanent damage occurs." Colonel Turner wheeled himself closer. "What do you need?" "A controlled electromagnetic pulse, precisely calibrated to disrupt the quantum properties of the nanomedicine without damaging organic neural tissue," Nathan explained. "In the facility, they have specialized equipment for this. We'll have to improvise." Wilson stepped forward unexpectedly. "I might be able to help with that. Before joining the Rangers, I worked in experimental electronics. Give me the specifications and I can build something that might work." Hope flickered across Emily's face. "Really?" Wilson nodded confidently. "Military training includes improvising solutions with limited resources. If Dr. Westbrook can tell me exactly what frequencies we need, I can modify some of this medical equipment to generate the right kind of pulse." Nathan quickly pulled up the extraction protocols he'd memorized from Falcon's file, detailing the precise electromagnetic frequencies needed to disrupt the quantum entanglement without harming neural tissue. "It's incredibly precise," he warned. "Too strong and we could cause brain damage. Too weak and we won't affect the nanomedicine at all." "I understand," Wilson replied, already examining the available equipment with a critical eye. "Give me an hour." While Wilson worked on the modified EMP device, Nathan continued monitoring Falcon's condition. The connection with Atlas was helping maintain some stability, but Falcon still cycled between brief moments of clarity and longer periods of disconnection, where he recited operational details from distant missions. "It's like he's trapped between worlds," Emily observed, still holding her brother's hand. "Sometimes he's here with us, then he's pulled away again." Nathan nodded grimly. The nanomedicine has essentially created bridges between his consciousness and multiple information sources simultaneously. His mind is trying to process more data than any human brain was designed to handle. "But Atlas helps?" she asked hopefully, watching the dog's unwavering presence at her brother's side. "Significantly. The emotional connection provides something for James's consciousness to anchor to, something real and immediate that can temporarily override the flood of external information." The extraction team had established a defensive perimeter around the clinic, with lookouts positioned to provide early warning of approaching threats. Inside, Rodriguez assisted Nathan with Falcon's medical care, while Cruz coordinated security with Colonel Turner. "Search patterns suggest they're still focused on the immediate area around the facility," Colonel Turner reported. "But they'll expand the radius soon. We need to be mobile within 3 hours. Moving him again carries significant risks," Nathan cautioned, "especially during or immediately after the extraction attempt." "Staying here is riskier," Cruz countered. "We have a secondary location prepared, a private medical facility owned by a veteran sympathetic to our cause. Better equipment, better security." Nathan checked Falcon's vital signs again, noting with concern that despite Atlas's stabilizing presence, the overall trend was still declining. "We may not have a choice. His condition is deteriorating just more slowly than before." Wilson returned, carrying what looked like a heavily modified defibrillator connected to additional components salvaged from the clinic's equipment. "It's ready for testing. Not pretty, but it should generate the specific frequency pattern you specified." Nathan examined the improvised device with both admiration and concern. "You're sure about the precision?" "As sure as I can be without laboratory calibration," Wilson replied honestly. "I've included a variable intensity control so we can start low and increase gradually if needed." The gravity of what they were attempting hung heavy in the room. This makeshift device, built from repurposed medical equipment, was their only chance to save Falcon from the deteriorating effects of experimental military technology. "We should begin immediately," Nathan decided, "preparing additional emergency medications in case something went wrong." Atlas will need to maintain contact throughout the procedure. The neural connection might help stabilize James during the extraction. Emily looked terrified but nodded in understanding. "What can I do?" "Talk to him," Nathan suggested. "Remind him of memories you share, especially physical sensory memories, smells, sounds, physical sensations. Anything that might help ground his consciousness to his own experiences rather than the external data." As they prepared for the procedure, Falcon suddenly became more agitated, his speech more rapid and fragmented. "Incoming, 3 vehicles, approaching from the southwest, armed personnel." Colonel Turner immediately checked the security feeds, his expression growing grim. "He's right. 3 unmarked black SUVs approximately 2 miles out and approaching fast." "How could he know that?" Cruz demanded, peering at the surveillance monitor. "The neural connection works both ways," Nathan realized with dawning comprehension. "He's not just receiving information, he's connected to active surveillance systems, including apparently ones monitoring our current location." "We're out of time," Rodriguez announced tensely. "Either we do this now, or we evacuate immediately." Nathan looked at Emily, the decision ultimately hers to make. The extraction is our best chance, but attempting it under pressure increases the risks significantly. Emily squeezed her brother's hand once more, then straightened with newfound determination. "Do it. James would rather take the chance than live this way, trapped between worlds, used as a military intelligence asset against his will." Nathan nodded, quickly organizing everyone for their roles. "Emily, keep talking to him. Colonel, monitor those vehicles' approach. Wilson, prepare the device at lowest setting. Cruz, Rodriguez, be ready to move him if this fails." Atlas seemed to sense the urgency, pressing closer to Falcon, his entire body alert and focused. Nathan carefully positioned the modified EMP device near Falcon's head, making final adjustments to the frequency settings. "Everyone stand clear except Emily and Atlas," Nathan instructed. "The pulse shouldn't affect other electronics at this range, but don't take chances with medical devices or communications equipment." With a silent prayer that this improvised solution would work, Nathan activated the device. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the electromagnetic pulse generator powered up, its intensity building gradually as Wilson carefully adjusted the controls. Falcon's body went rigid the moment the pulse engaged, his back arching slightly against the bed. Atlas whined, but maintained position, somehow understanding the critical importance of maintaining physical contact with his handler during this crucial moment. The monitors tracking Falcon's neural activity showed immediate changes, patterns, shifting, reorganizing. Whether this represented success or catastrophic failure remained to be seen. For 30 agonizing seconds, the electromagnetic pulse continued as Wilson carefully modulated the frequency according to Nathan's instructions. Falcon's body remained tense, his eyes moving rapidly beneath closed lids, while Atlas maintained unwavering contact, the dog's body pressed firmly against the bed despite his evident distress. "Neural activity is spiking across all regions," Nathan reported tensely, watching the monitors. "This is the critical phase. Either the nanomedicine begins to decouple, or..." He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone understood the stakes. Colonel Turner's voice cut through the tension. "Vehicles now 1 mile out, moving fast. Increase intensity by 10%, Nathan directed Wilson, who adjusted the controls with precise movements. The device's whine grew marginally higher as the pulse strengthened. Falcon's body suddenly went completely still, the monitors showing a momentary flatline before erupting into chaotic patterns. Emily gasped in horror, clutching her brother's hand tighter. "What's happening?" she demanded, voice breaking. "Neural reset," Nathan explained, rapidly adjusting medications in the IV. "The pulse is disrupting the quantum properties of the nanomedicine. His brain is essentially rebooting connections." Atlas whined more urgently, pressing his muzzle against Falcon's shoulder. Something in the dog's behavior suggested more than simple distress. There was an almost deliberate quality to his movements, as if he understood exactly what was needed. "Keep going," Nathan encouraged Wilson. "Maintain this level for another 20 seconds, then we'll reassess." The seconds crawled by, each one feeling like an eternity, as they watched for any sign of improvement or deterioration in Falcon's condition. "Vehicles entering the outer perimeter," Colonel Turner announced grimly. 6 minutes until they reach our position." Just as Nathan was about to order an increase in intensity, Falcon's eyes suddenly flew open. Unlike before, they were clear and focused, fixing immediately on Atlas. His right hand moved deliberately to grasp the dog's fur. "Atlas," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "Good boy." Nathan quickly checked the neural activity monitors, which showed dramatically different patterns than before. Still unstable, but with recognizable organization beginning to emerge from the chaos. "James!" Emily called hopefully. "Can you hear me?" Falcon turned toward his sister's voice, recognition lighting his features. "Em? What? Where am I?" "You're safe," she assured him, tears streaming freely now. "We got you out." Nathan moved to check Falcon's vital signs, cautiously optimistic at the dramatic change. "James, do you know who I am?" "Nathan," Falcon replied without hesitation. "Combat medic, Afghanistan." "That's right. And do you know what day it is?" Falcon frowned, confusion crossing his features. "Tuesday? No. Friday? I'm not. Everything's jumbled." "That's normal," Nathan assured him, instructing Wilson to power down the EMP device gradually. "Your brain is reorganizing. The nanomedicine in your system formed quantum connections to external networks. We've disrupted those connections, but it will take time for your neural pathways to sort themselves out." Understanding dawned in Falcon's eyes. "The treatment, Dr. Whitmore, they said it would just heal my shoulder." "It did more than that," Nathan confirmed. "Much more." Colonel Turner wheeled closer, urgency in his voice. "We need to move. Now. Security perimeter has been breached." Falcon's expression changed suddenly, his eyes taking on that distant quality again, though less pronounced than before. 3 vehicles, 8 personnel, military-grade weapons but civilian contractors. Reed is with them. "You can still see them?" Nathan asked, fascinated despite the danger. "Fragments," Falcon explained, struggling to organize his thoughts. "Like echoes. Before it was overwhelming, endless voices, operations, data. Now it's fading, but still there." Nathan turned to the others. "The extraction partially worked. The quantum connection is weakening but not completely severed. We need another treatment in a more controlled environment." 4 minutes, Colonel," Turner warned. Cruz and Rodriguez moved swiftly to prepare Falcon for transport, disconnecting non-essential monitoring equipment while maintaining the critical IV lines. Atlas stayed glued to Falcon's side, understanding the continuing importance of his presence. "Can you walk?" Nathan asked Falcon. "I think so," he replied, cautiously attempting to sit up with Emily's help. He managed to swing his legs over the edge of the bed, but swayed dangerously when he tried to stand. "Maybe not. Stretcher transport," Nathan decided immediately. Atlas stays in physical contact throughout the move. The extraction team worked with practiced efficiency, transferring Falcon to a portable stretcher while maintaining his IV lines. Atlas jumped up beside him on the stretcher, somehow understanding the need to stay close without impeding the medical equipment. Colonel Turner led the evacuation, coordinating with lookouts via secure radio. "Rear exit clear for now. Medical transport is positioned 50 yards south of the building. We move on my mark." Nathan administered a final dose of stabilizing medication to Falcon. "This will help manage symptoms during transport, but your neural activity is still highly unstable. The connection with Atlas seems to provide an anchor point. Keep hold of him if you can." Falcon nodded, his hand buried firmly in Atlas's fur. The dog laid his head protectively across Falcon's chest, whining softly. "Ready," Nathan confirmed, taking position alongside the stretcher. "Move now," Colonel Turner ordered, and the team sprang into action. They exited through the clinic's rear doors into the grey dawn light, moving in tight formation toward the waiting unmarked ambulance. Cruz and Wilson provided armed cover while Rodriguez and Nathan kept the stretcher stable, Emily staying close to her brother's side. They had covered half the distance to the vehicle when the first shout came from behind them. "Federal agents! Stop immediately!" Cruz turned, weapon raised defensively but not firing. "Keep moving," he instructed the others calmly. "Stick to the plan." The sound of vehicles rushing toward their positions spurred them to move faster. Rodriguez and Nathan broke into a controlled run with the stretcher, reaching the ambulance just as black SUVs came into view around the clinic's perimeter. "Get them loaded," Colonel Turner ordered, positioning his wheelchair to provide cover. "Wilson, deploy countermeasures." Wilson tossed several small devices toward the approaching vehicles. Seconds later, they detonated with blinding flashes and clouds of smoke, temporarily disorienting their pursuers and providing crucial seconds for loading. Nathan and Rodriguez swiftly secured the stretcher in the ambulance while Emily climbed. In beside her brother, Atlas remained firmly positioned against Falcon, who had begun to show signs of distress again, his speech fragmenting into mission details as the stress of the situation triggered neural instability. 3-mile exclusion zone. Authorization code Sierra Victor 9. Deploy tactical teams to Quadrant 4. The connection is strengthening again under stress, Nathan observed with concern, quickly preparing additional medication. Atlas, stay close to him. The dog needed no instruction, pressing his body firmly against Falcon's side as if trying to physically anchor him to reality. Cruz jumped into the driver's seat while Rodriguez secured the rear doors. Wilson and Colonel Turner followed in a separate vehicle, preparing to split from the ambulance to divide their pursuers' attention. "Go!" Nathan shouted as shots rang out behind them. The ambulance lurched forward, tires spinning on gravel before finding purchase and accelerating away from the clinic. Inside, Nathan worked frantically to stabilize Falcon, whose condition was deteriorating rapidly with the stress and movement. The partial extraction had created a new problem, fluctuating neural connections that strengthened and weakened unpredictably, causing Falcon to shift between lucidity and disconnection. "Atlas, stay." Falcon managed between fragmented operational details, his fingers gripping the dog's fur desperately. Atlas whined in response, pressing closer, somehow understanding his critical role. "The secondary location is 20 minutes. Out," Cruz called from the driver's seat. "We have pursuit, 2 vehicles maintaining distance but tracking." "James needs to stay calm," Nathan instructed Emily. "Talk to him, remind him of home, of normal life. Anything to keep his mind anchored to his own memories rather than the external data." Emily nodded, taking her brother's free hand. "Remember, when we were kids," she began softly, "and Dad built that tree house in the backyard. You fell and broke your arm trying to add a second story." Falcon's fragmented speech slowed slightly, his attention partially shifting toward his sister's voice. "Dad was so mad, but helped anyway." "That's right," Emily encouraged, tears in her eyes, but determination in her voice. "And remember, Mrs. Talbot's dog next door, the one that always stole your baseball whenever it went over the fence." A ghost of a smile touched Falcon's lips. "Rex never gave it back." Nathan watched the monitors closely, noting the gradual stabilization in Falcon's neural patterns as Emily continued sharing memories. The connection with his sister, combined with Atlas's physical presence, was helping override the quantum entanglement. At least temporarily, we've got a problem, Crews announced tensely from the front. Roadblock ahead, military vehicles. Nathan moved to look through the front window, his heart sinking at the sight of Humvees positioned across the road ahead, armed personnel taking defensive positions. "They're tracking us," Falcon said suddenly, his voice clearer. "The nanomedicine, it's a two-way connection. They can follow the signal. How do we block it?" Nathan asked urgently. Falcon struggled to focus, his hand tightening in Atlas's fur, as if drawing strength from the contact. "EMP, stronger. Complete disruption. A stronger pulse might cause permanent brain damage," Nathan warned. "Better than being their experiment," Falcon managed, determination breaking through the confusion in his eyes. Crews had slowed the ambulance, assessing their options. "Secondary route is compromised too. They've established a perimeter." Nathan made a quick decision. "How far to Colonel Turner's contact? The veteran with the private medical facility? 10 miles northwest," Crews replied. "But we'd need to break through this roadblock first." "Do it," Nathan ordered, securing equipment and bracing himself. "Full speed. They won't risk killing him. He's too valuable." Crews nodded grimly, accelerating the ambulance toward the roadblock, while Nathan protected Falcon and Emily. Atlas somehow understood to brace himself, his body securing Falcon against the inevitable impact. "Hold on!" Crews shouted as they barreled toward the line of vehicles. At the last possible moment, the military personnel scattered, unwilling to use deadly force against the ambulance. Crews swerved through the narrowest gap, clipping a Humvee's bumper, but maintaining control as they broke through the perimeter. "They're pursuing," Rodriguez reported, looking through the rear windows. "All vehicles." "James," Nathan said urgently, returning to his patient. "The nanomedicine, is there any way to mask the signal without destroying it completely?" Falcon's expression contorted with effort as he tried to access specific information through the chaos in his mind. "Water, deep water, disrupts quantum coherence temporarily." Nathan exchanged glances with Crews, who nodded in understanding. "The reservoir, 3 miles ahead." "We won't have much time," Nathan cautioned, preparing emergency equipment. "And the submersion will be dangerous in his condition." "No choice," Falcon managed, his lucidity returning momentarily. "Need to break. They're tracking long enough to reach safe location." Emily looked terrified but determined. "Whatever it takes." Atlas whined softly, sensing the increased tension. Falcon turned to his dog, his hand gently stroking the German shepherd's head. "Good boy, stay with me." The chase ended at the reservoir, where Crews drove the ambulance down a maintenance road to the water's edge. With military vehicles closing in, they made their desperate move, submersing Falcon and Atlas in the cold water just long enough to disrupt the quantum signal while Nathan monitored Falcon's vital signs. The gamble worked. The tracking temporarily broken, they escaped to Colonel Turner's contact, Dr. Marissa Chen, a brilliant neurologist who'd left government service after witnessing too many experimental programs that prioritized military applications over patient welfare. In her state-of-the-art private facility, Dr. Chen developed a revolutionary approach. Rather than trying to extract the nanomedicine completely, which risked catastrophic brain damage, she modified it to create a closed system. The quantum connections were redirected to form a neural network contained entirely within Falcon's own mind, transforming what had been a liability into an asset. 3 months later, Falcon stood in the sunlight outside Dr. Chen's facility, Atlas faithfully at his side. The dog that had refused to accept his fake death had ultimately saved his life. The neural connection between them remained stronger than ever. Falcon's enhanced brain now interpreting Atlas's subtle cues with unprecedented accuracy, while Atlas seemed to anticipate his handler's needs before Falcon himself was conscious of them. Reed and his superiors had eventually reached an uneasy compromise with Colonel Turner. Project Nightingale was permanently shut down, its research secured. In exchange for Falcon's freedom, he agreed to consult on certain matters where his unique abilities might save lives, but always on his own terms, never as a weapon or tool. "What now?" Emily asked, watching her brother throw a ball for Atlas in the facility's garden. "Now we live," Falcon replied simply, his mind finally his own again. "I've got a good job offer helping other veterans with service dogs. Turns out I have some unique insights into handler-dog neural connections." Atlas returned with the ball, dropping it at Falcon's feet and looking up expectantly. The bond between them, once strong enough to detect an empty casket and later powerful enough to anchor a mind lost in quantum chaos, now represented something even more significant. A future reclaimed against impossible odds. If this story touched your heart, remember to hit that subscribe button and join our community of storytelling enthusiasts. Every week, we bring you powerful tales of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bonds that define us. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Emily or Nathan's position? Your support helps us continue creating these meaningful stories that remind us what truly matters in life.